On a slightly later start today, but that doesn't matter because the news. Brody Ford, Bloomberg. IBM CEO Arvind Krishna says the company plans to slow or stop back office hiring, impacting around 26,000 staff, and 30% could, quote unquote, easily be replaced by AI in 5 years. Every once in a while you count IBM out of being sort of a cultural leader in the industry. The CEO of a company as large as IBM standing up and saying, it's possible we will reduce our total workforce by 30% within the next 5 years because software and technology more generally will be able to do what we pay human beings to do today. That's a big flag to plant. So we'll see whether or not Arvind is accurate in that assessment. But the notion that they've decided that filling the positions which were recently filled but now are not, which, if I remember correctly, is sort of the notion of back office hiring. It's not a net new job that they think they need a human being to do. It's, we had a human being doing this job for whatever set of reasons. That person's not here anymore. The policy going forward is, let's see how much pain we feel with the absence of that person. It's, again, big flag to plant. Go Big Blue. Will Douglas Heaven, MIT Technology Review. A profile of an interview with deep learning pioneer Geoffrey Hinton, who shares why he now thinks neural networks represent a quote unquote better form of intelligence. This is probably one worth reading. I'm not familiar with Geoffrey Hinton, but if MIT Technology Review is willing to describe this person as a pioneer in the field, then it's a person worth listening to, right? To the same extent that many of the people in my circles would say that Kevin Kelly or Alan Kay or Stuart Brand are people worth listening to. So I'll probably earmark this one and listen to it while I'm doing other stuff. Lucas Ropik, Gizmodo. The Writers Guild of America calls for a strike after negotiations with Netflix, Apple, Amazon, and others over pay and AI issues failed. Around 12,000 may strike. I wonder, I can't remember the last time that a major union in the entertainment industry, or really any American industry, went on strike. I feel like baseball went on strike some number of years ago. Shows you how much of a baseball fan I am. But what I think would be interesting here, if we assume that the strike goes forward and that 12,000 people who play meaningful, if not integral, roles in the production of film and television products, cinema and television products, big screen and small screen products. I don't know what the right terms are these days. If all these people go on strike and they refuse to work, and their major negotiating partner on the other side of the table is not traditional production houses, but instead technology companies, 2 out of 3, at least the ones that are listed here, are in the entertainment business because they can afford to be. Like, is it existential to Amazon or Apple's business to be producing, television and cinema? I don't know. I feel like the jury there is still out, but I'd look to somebody like Jason Snell for a more intelligent opinion there. The negotiation here is going to be interesting in part because, again, these are businesses which just, it feels different in a way that I'm failing to describe adequately for the Writers Guild of America to be negotiating against a 20th Century Fox or a Paramount or a Universal or even an HBO than it does to negotiate against an Apple or an Amazon or even a Netflix, although Netflix is much closer to a traditional production house than the other two are. So we shall see. Mark Gurman, Bloomberg. Memo. Samsung bans employees from using generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Google Bard, and Bing on company devices over concerns staff will leak sensitive data. Is there concern that the staff will leak sensitive data or that their devices will leak sensitive data? Because when you're Samsung, that's a really important delineation, right? Does the Android operating system and everything that Samsung has built both on top of Android and below Android, is that stack secure enough that they can trust their average employee to use, to open up a web browser and go to any generative or synthetic AI tool and have that tool not be able to reach into the device and get to some piece of data that it shouldn't? I think that's the interesting thing here, because if it really is on the surface what it says, then all you're left with is like, oh, surprise, surprise, Amazon doesn't trust its workforce. Gross, but not particularly newsworthy. Bill Toulis, Bleeping Computer. Europol, the FBI, and others seize the dark web monopoly market, arrest 288 people, and seize over 50 million euro in cash and crypto, along with 850 kilograms of drugs, after Hydra's 2022 takedown. I'm not familiar with Hydra. I can't help but think that the organizers of that crime ring, which apparently is not the one that was seized by law enforcement, thought it would be cute to borrow the name from the Marvel narrative universe. But that's not the story. The story is that a piece of software, a platform on the dark web that was facilitating illegal activity, has been seized by the major law enforcement agencies of the United States, the European Union. It wouldn't surprise me if others are involved. And I think that's interesting because one of the major refrains, one of the major aspects of the percussion of anti-crypto thinking for years now has been the only thing this is good for is to facilitate bad behavior. The only thing cryptocurrencies are useful for are for people in the dark web who are exchanging money for the most horrific goods and services that any person can imagine. I don't doubt that that's true. They seized some amount of crypto, but they 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 got the whole organization. Like, law enforcement was successful, and we could have some kind of debate on how much earlier might they have been able to catch the operators of the monopoly market without cryptocurrency. But if you pay attention to the people who are advocates of crypto as a technology, one of the things that they will point out to you is this notion that it provides some greater means of anonymity is false. Like, it's all on chain. That's the whole trick. And so hiding illicit exchanges of uh, currencies is not the fundamental aspect of the rise of crypto that many of the people who have aligned themselves against that technology would tell you that it is. In the same way that, roll the clock back 12 months ago, another aspect of that percussion was it consumes a preposterous amount of electricity. You'll notice the New York Times attempted to make that case at some point within the last handful of weeks. But aside from that story, no one is shopping the story that crypto consumes too much electricity because it's improving in its energy efficiency. So good that we caught bad guys. I assume that they're as bad as bad guys get, but I have no idea. And I'm not sure how I could determine that information. But what's more meaningful to me about this story is it's a significant piece of evidence that the idea that the advent and popularity of cryptocurrency, right, math, software on the internet to facilitate transacting, does not appear to have hindered the major law enforcement agencies of the world from doing their job. Frank Chaparro, The Block. Coinbase launches international exchange, planning to let international users trade perpetual futures out of Bermuda as the company tussles with U.S. regulators. Perfect story to follow on from the last one. Coinbase has made quite the show of asking the U.S. government to outline a sufficient set of regulations so that they can operate a successful business in this country. The U.S. government has failed to provide those regulations, and so Coinbase is doing what is in the best interest of their business, which is we'll go find other places where we can do business because there is a regulatory framework that we can at least see and observe and therefore operate within. Is what they're doing fundamentally good versus not good? Let's have an honest dialogue about the moral value of the global financial market broadly, if you want to have that particular debate. I don't care to. Point is, this is the system that we all live within, and the tools to facilitate human beings to transact, irregardless of nation state borders, are tools we're not putting back in the box. It's not possible to put them back in the box because it's math, and these are all counting machines on some level. And so the greater degree of maturity businesses like Coinbase can develop, right? FTX famously flamed out and they were operating out of the Bahamas. But I'd like to believe that some business could show that it's possible to do above board international trading of cryptocurrency. Is Coinbase going to be that business? We shall see, but some entity is going to have to prove that it's possible to do this within the larger apparatus of the global financial system, because you're not going to be able to stop people from swapping sats. Could you maybe stop them from being able to turn around and use those sats to buy a sandwich? Maybe, but if the guy making the sandwich is interested in holding sats, then kind of a hard sell at that point. Andrew Cunningham, Ars Technica. Apple uses its rapid security response feature, announced at WWDC 2022, to push a non-beta public update for the first time to iOS, iPadOS, and macOS users. Must have been a pretty bad flaw. The ability that Apple apparently has only really had in production for a year, to force security patches and software patches in general on its entire user base is a tool that I have to imagine they are loath to use. There's a pessimistic way to look at it and say they're greedy, they do everything in order to facilitate enriching themselves. But the alternate point of view, which John Gruber is infamous at this point for repeating, and which I think is if you can't grant this premise to Apple, I don't know what tech business you could grant it to, which is an adage from Walt Disney. And my recollection of the quote is, "We don't make movies to make money. We make money so that we can make more movies." If you can't grant the premise that if you grant the premise that any organization in the technology industry, even at the top echelon, is a group of people who are attempting to do the right thing and further the state of the art in the areas of business in which they participate. Can you think of an organization aside from Apple that is willing to operate that way? I would put Microsoft in that category. I'm not sure I would put Google in that category, but again, it's a sort of pub debate at some level. But they are the organization that I would argue is most likely to, at the end of the day, just be a group of well-meaning people. And I think that the evidence that this has not been used before, although again, it's only been a year, I think if we fast forward another year or another 2 years and we look back at how many times they have used this ability to force change on their user base, my hope / suspicion is that it will be an incredibly small number of incidents, and that they only employ that capability when it is obvious to them that not doing so represents a material threat to the well-being of the people who spend their hard-earned money to buy Apple products. But you can disagree. Chris Holt, Engadget. BeReal rolls out Real People, a curated timeline of quote unquote the world's most interesting people, first to the United Kingdom, as the startup seeks to reverse slowing growth. Again, an interesting pairing of pieces of news. Taking a piece of software that when you first shipped it to the public was, here's a way for you to share a snapshot of where you are and what you're doing at a particular moment in time with a set of people which you explicitly choose to make that information available to. But now that the monetization of that experience is showing itself to be insufficient, what we're going to do instead is collect a list of people who are producing content which we believe will draw user engagement. I mean, if that doesn't reek of we got to figure out how to make money, or there's no reason, no means by which to keep offering this experience to people, I don't know what does. To say nothing of a social networking application that, to my knowledge, has not had a meaningful evolution since it launched to the public over a year ago, I want to say. For their conclusion to be, we need to offer something that is fundamentally different from the value proposition that we initially put out into the market, right? you have no relationship with these people, but they're the most interesting people in the world. I wonder if the Corona guy, no, it's not the Corona guy. Snoop is the Corona guy. The Dos Equis guy is going to be included in that list because that would be a hell of a get. That that's the reason you're going to engage with this tool. At that point, aren't you just competing against all the bigs? Aren't you competing against Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat, where the 1,000 most famous people on the planet are all spending their time? Like, how much are you going to have to spend to get Katy Perry to use BeReal instead of whatever else she's using right now? And is that spend really going to produce greater financial returns? Like, Meta, Sing, Reuters. Online study company Chegg suspends full year outlook, saying ChatGPT's rising popularity is pressuring subscriber growth. CHGG drops around 50% and is down around 64% year to date. Yeah, if you had built a piece of software over the last 3 years that was designed to help human beings discover and digest and internalize new information, you're in a bad way right now. Because if ChatGPT as a technology and an interface has shown itself to be good for anything in these early innings, it's making information sort of palatable and digestible to the average person, arguably because of that interface, right? I would be curious to see the alternate timeline where what ChatGPT produces when you offer it a query is a full page of, 1,500 words on a given subject. Something tells me it wouldn't be as popular, is the point I'm trying to make here. I think the chat interface it's a usage model and an interaction model that is so embedded in humanity at this point that I think that's a significant part of its success. But aside from that, we have to just for a moment take a pit stop and remind ourselves that these tools are, what's Nilay Patel's phrase, confident liars. They're not giving you information that is accurate, right? I was listening to Tony Cowan Brown and Ben Evans this week, and Ben Evans is right to point out, if you go to any of these tools and you ask for Benedict Evans's bio, it's not going to return the factual truth. It's going to return what the software determines is probabilistically the most accurate sounding response, right? So where he went to university is like a factoid that will shift depending on, how you phrase your prompt or any other number of inputs. Say what you will about how much you need to care about where Benedict Evans went to school, but in the universe where you're using these tools because you're a student and you're studying in order to certify that you hold knowledge so that you can move forward in your life and career, having accurate facts matters. So I would hope that if Chegg or any other online study tool has a leg to stand on, it's going to be, how do we draft behind the massive organism that is large language model technology while retaining the thing that we know is very important as a study tool, which is what we're telling people accurate. Samantha Cole, Vice. Pornhub disabled its website in Utah following a new age verification law for porn sites. instead showing a video asking users to talk to their representatives. Related to the New York Times, the current push for age restrictions on certain online content in the United States echoes the Communications Decency Act of 1996, which was struck down by the Supreme Court in 1997. Something tells me the most material impact that this will have on the citizens of Utah is a significant uptick in the usage of VPNs, because restricting access to various forms of content on the internet is not a strategy with a long history of success. The notion of needing to verify age to access some forms of experiences is a reasonable notion. We don't let 15-year-olds, we don't give 15-year-olds $15,000 credit card balance or credit card limits, right? Lending limits. There are some things that our culture and our society still understands are more the purview of people with more mature minds and more mileage on their souls. Porn, though, is this interesting thing because, like, its utility overlaps with, like, a younger age, right? Like where hormone surge first peaks, right? Like, I'm very much speaking out of school right now, but I say that only to frame the following comment. At what point are we going to have a discussion as a culture about the fundamental health impacts of pornography? Are we going to do that ever? I kind of hope we do. I kind of hope that we explore the notion that it may not be without negative consequence to make any and every form of erotic material a human being can think up available for any human being, provided they meet an age requirement. I'm not sure the age requirement is so much the issue when it comes to pornography as more important questions like, what does it do to your perceptions of the role of sexual experience within the larger scope of human experience? But that's just me. Kiff Leswig, CNBC. Apple and Google submit an industry specification proposal to address unwanted location tracking by Bluetooth devices and ask for input from other companies. I bet they do, because Apple shipped a thing which, again, my personal bias with regard to Apple, has material utility and benefit for well-meaning users. What I'm talking about are AirTags, right? They managed to engineer a thing the size of an American quarter that can reveal its precise location in a sufficiently secure way, which is to say, it can reveal its precise location only to its registered owner, but it can reveal its precise location to any other compatible device and then route that information through Apple's ecosystem to the registered owner. The simple version of this is, if you leave your keys at your friend's house and then you go into Apple's Find My app and you press the button that says, I lost my keys, the AirTag that's attached to your keys will talk to your friend's Apple devices and say, hey, I'm lost and I belong to someone. And their Apple device will throw that information into Apple's cloud, and Apple's cloud will say, oh, we know who that belongs to, and be able to notify you, the person who lost your keys, without revealing that it was you who lost your keys. That's a useful thing. The problem is useful things can also be employed by bad actors as opposed to earnest ones. So good for them. Push for a specification that makes these things more secure at lower levels of the technology stack, because it should be difficult to abuse tools like that if you're a bad actor, while preserving as much of the utility for earnest actors as you possibly can. Keep it up. Aaron Holmes, The Information. Sources. Microsoft plans to sell a ChatGPT version on a dedicated server in Q2, separating data from that of other customers and costing up to 10 times more. If you're as old as me or older, you'll remember that there was a time when Google was in the server rack business, when Google would sell you an appliance that would sit on your premises and provide Google search services. This smells very similar. I'm sure that there's some subset of customers for whom they'd like to be able to use these tools, but can't unless the thing operating the software is co-located. Great. Maybe it'll work. We'll see. Mercedes rule. Financial Times. Letters. The US and EU warn Malaysia over national security and foreign investment risks if the government gives Huawei a role in the country's 5G network. This strikes me as very much a sort of crisis of authority story. The network hardware layer of the internet is extremely important. And the notion that the United States and the European Union are working together in order to dissuade a country like Malaysia from taking investment from Chinese business in Huawei to deploy 5G capable networking equipment is, suffice to say, this to me is the intersection of crisis of authority as a theme, and this is cyber as a theme. New York Times. CCDH. Despite Google's promise to demonetize climate denial content in 2021, researchers find 100 YouTube videos with 18 million plus views that feature ads for big brands. I'm going to assume that 18 million view number is cumulative, and aside from that, what is the denominator here? You found 100 videos of people, I assume, denying the dominant narrative around climate science. And some of those videos are making money or have made money because they achieved high enough viewership. How many videos reinforce the dominant point of view on climate science? How many combined views do those videos have? How much advertising revenue has been booked against that content? I'm not saying that there isn't a reasonable motivation to minimize the extent to which denial of the change in the Earth's climate is something that people can profit off of on YouTube's platform. I'm inclined to agree with them and say that maybe you shouldn't be allowed to profit off of putting forth that point of view, because in my layman's perspective, that point of view is wrong. But I don't agree with the idea that it is Google's exclusive responsibility to protect anyone who might go to YouTube from ever seeing something that puts forth that point of view. And for anyone who would put forth that point of view to 100% of the time not be able to make a dime off of putting forward that point of view. I just don't think that's a reasonable ask given the scale of YouTube as a platform. And so to me, this falls into the we are the moderators bucket. It's going to be up to us as cultures on some timeline to align with a particular set of viewpoints such that when you encounter the alternative viewpoint somewhere on the internet, you've built up the sort of intellectual immunities to be able to deal with it. I think that's what we're all going to need to get better at, because expecting the business, the platform, the neutral party to do all that work for you, I mean, it just creates an environment where you're not expected to invest in your own intellect or your own point of view or your own cultural values such that you can confront alternate ideologies, however heinous or preposterous they may be, and not fall to pieces. Amelia Wattenberger. Why chatbots are not the future of interfaces for LLMs. The best prompts are not obvious. People will get sick of typing. Responses are isolated, and more. I drilled into this one just briefly. It looks like it could be good, if for no other reason than Amelia appears to have spent the time and energy to construct their own bespoke online presence, right? They're not writing for some major outlet. This isn't a random Substack post. In fact, the graphic design of the piece shows that this is a person who cares about the little things. And so they're, I think, probably a good person to hear from with regard to the little things around how to get the best out of LLMs as a technology. I, for example, am in complete agreement. Typing is obnoxious. It's the best form of human input to computing machines that we've found to date. But I would hope that the potential for binding LLM technology with verbal voice capture and natural language processing technology would, in the not too distant future, produce an ability to have something that looks a lot more like human dialogue in order to drive this technology and make use of it. Responses being isolated, the best prompts not being obvious. These are the checklist items that the engineering teams of the world are going to go attack in order to make meaningful product improvement. But I'm optimistic that Amelia has a point of view, not just on what's wrong with the state of tools today, but what what direction should we be headed in terms of the state of tools tomorrow. So this is one I look forward to reading. Dan Seifert, The Verge, OnePlus Pad review. A bright screen, excellent build quality, and snappy performance, but limited built-in apps, subpar keyboard and stylus, and a mid-tier CPU. I didn't go look, but I assume that the name OnePlus Pad refers to a tablet form factor as opposed to a phone form factor. The story of Android on tablet category devices is going to go down in history as, at least the history of the technology industry, as just a bizarre uh, miss, frankly. Like, maybe the ultimate lesson there will be that for every 10 people you give a tablet shaped device to, 9.5 of them just use it as a personal television and don't really do anything else with it. I think many people in the Apple community would make the case that the absence of pro grade software is the number one thing that holds the iPad back from being what Federico Viticci called the modular computer, right? Like, it has all the horsepower, it has all the storage, it has all the capability to sort of morph from being a sheet of glass you hold in your hands to the central processing unit that is connected to a massive set of displays, a full-size keyboard, an external microphone, and multiple pointing devices. You can do all of that with an iPad that you buy off the street today. Problem is, the software experiences don't live up to that set of hardware unless you're a very particular type of nerd. I feel seen. Android, on the other hand, what is anybody doing with large form factor Android devices? I mean, even the most common popular use cases for uh, consumer software on phones all up, social media applications, YouTube is the only one that I'm aware of that lends itself to a larger display. And that's because YouTube fundamentally is a video delivery system. It's not any better to consume Facebook on a tablet. It's not any better to consume Twitter on a tablet. Maybe that's disprovable on the edges. Famously, you can't consume Instagram on a tablet, even though Instagram, at least until somewhat recently, was in the photography business. And you would think that looking at a photograph would be a thing that would be better on a larger display. Something tells me that there was a decision somewhere in Menlo Park where they came to the conclusion that because the tablet is less likely to follow the human being around as they go about their day, there's not as much potential data harvesting to be done. Therefore, it's not worth shipping a first-class experience on a large display. But I'm getting completely aside from the fact that OnePlus has made a new device. And I think it's reasonable to be completely sidetracked because who cares? Does anybody get excited about a new implementation of the existing form factors at this point? I don't know anyone who does. Like, I get the notion of, like, if you have had a device and it's on its last legs or it has died, it's good to have sort of state-of-the-art offerings in the marketplace. But is anybody, like, really pumped about the next tablet or the next smartphone? I don't think so. Jen Weixner, New York Magazine. Crypto advocates say recent written and unwritten policies by financial regulators are making it unfeasible or impossible for crypto firms to operate in the United States. I won't repeat what I said earlier with regard to the Coinbase story. because I've said it many times, and it's a bit of a long news day, and I've only got deadlifts left to do, and then I get to go on with my day. Crypto as a technology, at its most base case of a shared state, default, open, and public computer, is not going away. The extremely popular and noisy application of that technology, which is allowing for currencies to be created and then traded, is not going away. To the extent that the United States moves in a regulatory capacity to make it more difficult for this form of innovation to occur in the United States, for people to experiment with the base technology and look for potential applications, some of them unscrupulous, some of them earnest. The more the United States makes that difficult, you're not putting crypto back in the box. All you're doing is ensuring that the businesses that do get it right, the ones who do figure out how to unlock value utilizing this technology, value both in terms of pure utility to the average user and in economic value in the form of building businesses off of providing that utility, or on top of, you're just going to make sure that doesn't happen in the United States. And I don't see how you can make the case that that's a good thing. So, Allison Johnson, The Verge. ThinkPhone by Motorola review. Great build quality with IP68 rating and useful PC integration features, but a lackluster camera and finicky app streaming. This thing should have been called the ThinkPad. I would have liked it if Lenovo had the courage to just admit that the ThinkPad brand is one of the longest lasting brands in personal computing, period. If you look at this device, they very clearly took as much inspiration as they could from all the ThinkPads that came before them. I just think that copping out and calling it the ThinkPhone is not going far enough. Aside from that, is it going to do anything materially different? Sounds like it does, but it doesn't do those things especially well. But who knows? Maybe Apple's hegemony as the only manufacturer that's able to sell a traditional laptop computer and a telephone that know how to work together seamlessly. Maybe the only other business in the game that can compete with that value proposition is Lenovo with the ThinkPad. Why not? Chris Welch, The Verge. Sources detail Amazon's canceled plan to make Halo a success. The sophisticated AI-based fitness service was undone due to significant headwinds and low sales. I said enough about the Halo devices back last week, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I'm sure they had grand plans for what was possible. And again, as I said last week, I can't think of many other businesses that were better positioned in order to be able to provide potentially useful information with regard to a user's health, because it is like the parent business is the thing that facilitates procuring whatever it is you need to improve your health. You need to eat more dried fruit and nuts because your diet's messed up. Amazon will sell you dried fruit and nuts. You need to get off your butt and start jogging in order to improve your cardiovascular health. Amazon will sell you the shoes. Like the alignment was, I can't think of a business that was better positioned. But Amazon's track record of building consumer electronics and software services with a sufficient level of trust, both from the end user and from any other parties in the system, not that strong. Is Alexa a success? Yes. That's not enough.